Good afternoon, everyone. It is Monday, October the 25th, 2021. It is currently 4:42 p.m. Central Time, and I'm coming to you from the empty sanctuary of Victory Baptist Church, located right here in Ovalo, Texas. And I apologize. I had the mic muted because I was getting ready to play our, professional intro. And then all of a sudden I realized, wait a minute, I don't have the professional intro queued up. So I need to turn on the microphone and I need to start talking right now because we're live on the air and I don't have the intro ready to go. Now, the reason I don't have the intro ready to go is because I have both slots right here in my software. I have them both filled with, the audio that we're going to be reviewing. So I forgot that I had removed the professional intro from one of the slots and put, the audio that we need to review there. So I have both slots filled with audio. So we're going to be listening to a lot of audio this afternoon. We're going to be talking about it. We're going to be analyzing it, all with this goal in mind to try to find out what's going on in the world of Christianity and trying to understand it, seeing where that could be leading, talking about it, trying to determine, are they teaching things that are good, things that are bad? What's happening in the world of Christianity? It's something that we do somewhat frequently here, and we're going to do this again. Now, this is part two. If you missed part one, you didn't miss a lot. Here's what happened. Sunday morning, I got here to church, and we were going to start our, live in-person service at 10 a.m. So I had just a little bit of time, and I happened to see that Issues Etc., which is a podcast, they did an episode on Sinless Christianity. And I'm like, wait, what? Sinless Christianity? So what's going on? Well, they are discussing this teaching that happened at a church located here in Texas, where they promote this idea of sinless Christianity. And as soon as I saw the title, I'm like, wait, this is so relevant to so much of what we've been doing here on the Theology Central podcast. If you've been listening to our Bible study exercise on 1 John, this idea of sinless Christianity would come into play and would be very relevant. If you've been listening to we finally finished the series. If you listen to the entire series of people rejecting the doctrine of faith alone salvation, this would be, in a sense, somewhat relevant to that as well. We've been talking about a number of issues, and I thought, that's a relevant topic. Let me at least introduce it. So I did a brief introduction Sunday morning. We got a little bit into the audio, and then I had to stop because, people were going to arrive for Sunday school. So I probably made a bad decision to introduce it Sunday morning, but in some ways, I don't feel bad about it because it at least threw the idea out there, got people thinking. And I had a number of emails from people going, here's the information you asked for. Here's the information you asked for. So that's good. And this is going to turn into, I can't say a lengthy series. What we may do is we may stop this series here if we can finish the review of all the audio. And then we'll start a new series to review audio from this church that's mentioned in what we're about to listen to as being this church where there's a lot of buzz and talk about it. And I think we're going to really, investigate this church and see what they're teaching and what's going on and why maybe there's so much buzz and excitement about it. What are they doing that is getting so much attention, and how much attention is there really for this church? So I think we'll set that up in a separate series, and we'll bring this series to a conclusion hopefully today. We will see. But are you ready? We're going to go back to Issues Etc. I don't even know when this episode aired, but on Issues Etc., typically every Friday, they do a segment called This Week in Pop Christianity with Chris Roseborough from Fighting for the Faith. And as the title tells, as the title states, you can pretty much guess what it's about. It's about what's going on in the world of popular Christianity. And I think it's a great idea. I try to listen to the segment every week so that I have an idea of what's going on. And then sometimes we talk about it. This time, it just seemed to fit in perfectly with everything we've been talking about on the Theology Central podcast. So, it all just works together. And so hopefully you'll benefit greatly from it. But we're going to go back to whichever episode, I don't even know when this episode aired, but This Week in Pop Christianity with Chris Rosebrough, he's the host of Fighting for the Faith, and they're talking about Sinless Christianity. We're just going to go back to the very beginning, allow them to introduce the topic and move forward, and then we will start reviewing it, offering thoughts and analysis, and then we will we'll see if we can we can review all of this audio, and then what we'll do is in this series we'll go into a series where we start talking about the church that they are going to mention here in just a second. So hopefully that all makes sense. Hopefully, yeah. Is that a thumbs up on my intro? I don't know. I got started off. I started off in the wrong way when I realized, wait a minute, I don't have I get used to that. Just, going live, hitting play, letting the professional intro play out and then come in. And when you kind of immediately get caught off guard, well, then that kind of breaks everything up. But what can you do? You're live on the air. So it's not like I can say, stop, start over. There's no starting over. It's just like life, right? Yeah, there's no do-over, right? There's no starting over in a sense, okay? Now we could talk about forgiveness. All right, you get the idea. That could get into a whole philosophical discussion, but we will not go there right now. Here we go. This week in Pop Christianity, a segment from Issues, Etc., the podcast. So you should subscribe to that. It's from a Lutheran theological perspective, but they still cover a lot of very important topics. They brought in Chris Rosebrough to talk about what's going on in the world of pop Christianity, and, well, this is what they had to say. Let's listen.
The Bible is pretty clear. Christians are also sinners. We remain sinners and therefore in need of the forgiveness of sins found only in Jesus Christ, until we die or Jesus comes back again and we are transformed into his full likeness. Does this mean that Christians commit every sin there is possible? No, but it does mean that we remain sinners. Even the apostle bemoans his sinful state and finds his solace solely in the mercy of Jesus Christ.
Now, I think this is a very important topic, and it's somewhat baffling to me that this topic needs to be talked about more and more in 2021. You think by 2021, this would just be something every Christian agrees upon, but it's not, and I am just confused why there's ever any argument. So let me state it even more forcefully than they did. Let me state it as bluntly as I can. If you are a Christian, let me make it very clear. You are still a sinner in practice. In your position before God, you are without sin. You don't sin in your position before God because you're covered in the imputed righteousness of Jesus Christ. His active and passive obedience has been accredited to your account. In your position, you are holy. You are a new creature. Old things are passed away. All things have become new in your position. But in practice, you are still a sinner. You sin, and let me I'm going to state this as clearly as I can. You will continue to sin until your death and resurrection, or until Christ returns, until you are glorified. You are going to commit sin in this life. And let me I'm going to even state it even more bluntly if I can. You cannot stop sinning. Now, you can struggle to sin less, but you will continue to sin. You do not have some supernatural ability to stop sinning. Now, I know that goes against what Christians teach throughout churches all across the United States of America, because usually Christianity is sold like this. When you come to Christ, when you are saved, you are delivered from the power of sin, so you can now say no to sin and you can live a holy life. Christians will say that and then literally almost in the same sentence say, however, you won't be perfect. Well, as long as you say people can't be perfect, then you're saying they cannot stop sinning. Therefore, they are still under the power of sin. Because if you can't stop sinning, then clearly sin still has power in your life. So I don't know why we try to say these very contradictory things. Now that you're a Christian, We talk about this almost being true of your practical life. You're a new creature. Old things are passed away. All things are new. We say that in regards to people's practical life. We say that the power of sin has been broken, so you no longer have to sin, and that you're now free to stop sinning. And then we turn around and say, okay, even though I just told you all of that, well, no one's going to be perfect. Wait a minute. How can you say those things and not even realize that you're contradicting yourself? You are a sinner. You will continue to sin. Now, that doesn't mean you just accept it and excuse it. That means we have to fight against it. We have to try to put off the old and put on the new. It's a continuing battle, but you will continue to sin. You may be able to sin less, but you will never be sinless. You will sin throughout your Christian life. Anyone who gives you any idea that it's all gone and now you can live without sin, they not only are they in denial, they are deceived, and they're trying to deceive you, because the only way for you to pull that off is you have to start minimizing the so-called smaller sins so you don't see them as sin and only worry about the so-called bigger sins, and then convince yourself, well, I don't commit the bigger sins, therefore I am sinless. But no, you are sinful. You will be sinful. That is not only a fact biblically, it's a fact in reality if you look at anyone's life. I don't know why Christians continue to, it's almost like we sell Christianity with an idea that no one actually experiences. And then when people get disgruntled, discouraged, disillusioned, and want to give up, then we can't figure out why. Well, because you sold them something that they never truly experienced. Because that's not the way it works. I'm saved by grace alone, through faith alone, because of Christ alone. And my position, I am perfect. I'm a new creature. Old is gone. I am perfectly righteous. I'm perfectly holy. I am not sinful. I am covered in the perfect righteousness of Jesus Christ. That is in my position. But in practice, I still struggle with sin and will continue to sin until I'm in the presence of God, glorified body, and all of you understand what I'm referring to. So they stated it. I just wanted to I wanted to drive the point home even more so. Here we go.
So how is it that some are teaching that Christians stop sinning, that they are, if they're really Christians, sinless? Welcome back to Issues, Etc. I'm Todd Wilkin. It's time for This Week in Pop Christianity with Pastor Chris Rosebrough. We're going to talk about William Hinn's teaching on Christian sinlessness. Chris is pastor of Consfinger Lutheran Church in Oslo, Minnesota, and creator and host of the YouTube channel Fighting for the Faith. Chris, welcome back.
Thanks for having me back, Todd.
The name Hinn is familiar to a lot of people. Usually it's Benny Hinn, a very famous and rather odd televangelist. Is William any relation?
Yes, he is. William Hinn is the son of Benny Hinn's brother, William Hinn, Dr. William Hinn. So William Hinn, the one we're listening to, is the nephew of Benny Hinn.
What kind of a church does William Hinn serve?
So this is a brand new church endeavor that William Hinn and a fellow by the name of Todd White, he had a ministry that he's been doing down in Texas called Lifestyle Christianity, and it's been acting as a quasi-church for some time. But let's just say that Todd White doesn't have real super pastor skills, and so he and William Hinn have joined forces, and Lifestyle Christianity has kind of molded into and been enfolded into this new endeavor. And the name of the church is Risen Nation Church. And it is kind of all the talk and the rage within the NAR right now. There's a lot of buzz regarding Risen Nation Church. And all their claims regarding themselves as far as that they are a unique church designed to kind of restore things that have been lost to Christianity, and that they're going to be a church that's going to be an example of what it means to be on fire and be burning ones for Jesus. This is all in their language and their rhetoric. And so he's part of this new endeavor, and it's just basically a hotbed of real legitimate heresy.
All right, we'll stop right there for a second. It's called Risen Nation Church. You can find it online. They have a podcast, which is, see here, Risen Nation Church on Apple Podcast, Risen Nation Church. They also have a YouTube page, our YouTube channel, I should say, Risen Nation Church. I'm assuming the podcast is available everywhere. What we're going to do, not right now, but when this kind of mini series is over, we'll start a series where we review and look at everything about Risen Nation Church. If there's all this buzz about them and there's this excitement, well, what are they about? What do they teach? He calls it basically, a hotbed of heresy. Well, if that's the case, we want to expose that heresy. But the main thing is not just to expose the heresy, is to really hear what they're teaching. Let them teach what they teach in their own words so that, one, we are informed, but most importantly, so that we look for its influence. Always remember, this is such an important principle. You have the original heresy. The original heresy shows up. The original heresy, in many cases, is loudly and strongly condemned. It is exposed, it is condemned, and everybody says, that is heresy, and everyone's like, okay, we exposed it, we condemned it, and then everyone just kind of moves on. But here's what happens. Heresy that is exposed and condemned never goes away. It finds a way to start influencing, and that influence spreads here and it spreads there. And it may even lose the name of the original heresy, but you have to so know the original heresy that you can say, wait a minute. There's the original heresy. It's now over here, and it's evolved. It's changed its language. It's changed certain aspects. It's modified certain things, but that's the same heresy. You see this if we go back in church history. You have Pelagianism, right? And then it turned into semi-Pelagianism. So you have the original Pelagianism, which was obviously complete heresy. It was condemned, but it didn't go away. It just morphed into what we'll call semi-Pelagianism. And you have this over and over throughout church history. So even if we say, oh, Risen Nation Church, it's a hotbed of heresy, and everybody's like, okay, well then condemn it, move on. No, we got to know exactly what they're teaching. Look for any unique ways they teach it, and then see if that begins to show up in churches that would probably never identify with Risen Nation Church, but those ideas creep in and begin to, well, little leaven leaveneth the whole lump. That's why you always have to be paying attention to what's going on in churches. There's a lot of people there's a lot of churches who never would have said, look, we were influenced and we're following the model of Rick Warren, purpose-driven church. But when you look at their church, you're like, okay, they may not say they're following Rick Warren, but that's Rick Warren's model right there. Hey, we're not a part of the emergent church movement, but you're like, there it is right there. That you always have to look for and understand the heresy or the problem, the issue, and you have to understand it so that you can identify its influence as it moves away. It's initially condemned, but it never gets rid of it. It just changes shape and name and moves on. So I think that's very important. Right. Okay. Yeah. Heather's mentioning the same kind of concept with a theology. I don't want to mention it because then I'll end up tracing that. But she's mentioning a theology where, you have the original condemnation of it, but then it just shows up in these other circles. So very good. All right. It's making its way around in many forms. Very true. Very true. Very true. All right. And I don't want to mention it because, well, then I'll end up having to explain it and everything, and I don't want to do that right now. But that's exactly the case. She's mentioning a theology that was condemned in the early church, and then it makes its presence known in all kinds of different forms. And we're going to have to follow this church, Risen Nation Church here in Texas, and see exactly what's going on. And we will dedicate plenty of time to doing that. But for now, let's get back to this and try to get further along because we have a lot to review.
Is that the same Todd White who I think about a year or two ago was making all kinds of claims of healing that were unsubstantiated?
Yes. He's most famous for traveling around the world and lengthening people's legs, claiming that the Lord has told me to take a look at your legs, and wouldn't you know it, one leg is shorter than the other. And so by the power of the Holy Spirit, apparently he is able to take people's ailing leg problem and bring them to be equidistant. And he's just a flim-flam scammer is the best way I could put that.
We're going to hear it from William Hinn himself, but how would you describe, you mentioned NAR, that's the New Apostolic Reformation. Mm-hmm. How would you describe Hinn's theology?
As a hot mess. It's a blend between kind of old school prosperity preaching that you and I, have been familiar with over the last few decades, blended with NAR dominionism, and now with a super heavy dose of this idea of like Christian sinlessness, that that if you truly are in love for God and burning for Him, then sin won't even be an issue. So you got Pelagianism, false signs, false wonders, dominionism, and prosperity all kind of rolled up into one big bundle of yuck.
What are we going to?
And just note, Pelagianism has never gone away. It shows up in churches everywhere. Pelagianism, we've talked about Pelagianism in my church so many times. I don't know how many times we've covered like the 18, 19 points of Pelagianism. Everyone needs to know Pelagianism, how to identify Pelagianism. It is a heresy, a rank heresy that's so bad. And, it's showing up now again, right, with a mixture of a lot of other stuff. All right, here we go. I like to mention Pelagianism because a lot of people they may catch on to the NAR stuff or the charismatic stuff. They may say, oh, okay, I know that. But so many people will just drink Pelagianism down. I mean, like they'll just drink it like it's a nice cold bottle of ice water and not even realize it. So many times I've heard people say, oh, this is a great sermon. I'll listen to it. And you're like, that's Pelagianism. That's Pelagianism. How do you not see it? So, all right, let's get back to this.
You hear first from him.
So in order to set the table here, we're listening to a sermon about God's rest. So this is his interpretation of the Sabbath and God's rest. And he's going to do a divergent point in the middle of his sermon where he's going to reference Mark 4 and then the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 14, respectively talking about two different storms. And it's in the second soundbite where he'll go deep into Pelagianism, but he's setting the foundation here. And I think we should pay attention to how he's doing things. There's a particular allegorical way in which he's approaching the scriptures, but then he also creates his own fabricated definitions of Greek words.
I love it because Jesus, I think, gives us a picture of this in Mark chapter 4 when he's asleep. Remember, he's in the stern of the boat. All the waves are beating on the ship, and the disciples are scared and afraid, even though the King of Glory is with them, and they don't realize it. Where does it say that out of our innermost being, that he's going to dwell in our innermost being, that rivers of living water will come out of our innermost being? So Jesus is in the innermost part of this ship, representing humanity. And everything in the world is coming against the ship, but God is within you in the innermost part at rest. And they couldn't tap into that.
Now we have to stop right here. This is so... Now, before we get into their heresy and what he does here with the Greek, which is, again, we talked about it on Sunday morning. But let me just say, this is so common for this passage in Mark 4, where you say, okay, the disciples are in the boat, so the boat represents basically our life. The disciples represent all of humanity. Then the storms come, and they represent all the problems and trials that come into our life. And this is how we handle our problems. Pastors have done this for, I think, forever. And sometimes you just like, wait a minute, where are you saying dogmatically that this story occurred and that this is dogmatically what it represents? It's one thing to try to draw some application, but when you say, well, this represents, see, they represent humanity, this, and you're like, whoa. They say that like somehow the text says, like the text, it's literally in the text. What you are about to read is to be understood as an allegory and as a picture of this. You may try to draw an application. You just got to be very careful that you say, okay, here's the story in the text. What can we learn from it? What can we learn from it? Not that it's a picture of this. You've got to be very careful how you state it, and you've got to be very careful that you don't turn a historical narrative into something that maybe that's not even the purpose of the historical narrative. The historical narrative may just be there to demonstrate Jesus, his deity, that he has the ability to calm a storm, to rebuke a storm. It's showing his deity. Maybe that's the purpose of it. Is the purpose of it to demonstrate that, hey, when I'm going through the storms of life, I rebuke the storms in the name of Jesus? Is that what's supposed to be going on here? Like, sometimes we play very loose with the text, and we just start. It's almost like I don't know if you're ever, maybe I'm dating myself here, but there was a time that, maybe because we didn't have access to all the things that kids have access today, but someone would take a can of Play-Doh and open it up, and you're like, whoa, fun, right? And you would sit there and mess with the Play-Doh, and you would, turn it into this, and you'd make this, and you'd make that. Well, I think some pastors see the Bible like, ooh, a can of Play-Doh. Let me start twisting it. And, oh, look, everyone, look, see? And everybody's like, oh, wow, I've never seen that before. Yeah, you've never seen that before because it's not there. That's why. So, but all right. As soon as he starts talking, I'm like, man, he's just going full blown allegorical. Hey, that's what this represents. This is what this represents. And of course, he doesn't even have to prove that's what it represents, because people in the pew just like, okay, that's what it represents. And they're like, no, someone needs to raise their hand and go, well, how do we know it represents that? Based off what? Now, again, there's a way to draw the lessons from it. There is a way to draw lessons from it. A lot of times people misunderstand when I criticize this kind of preaching. I'm not saying that you can't say, here's a lesson. I'm not saying that you say, well, this, especially if the text does something very interesting, say, well, this is really weird that the text does this. You look for clues in the text, but I'm just saying sometimes you can just say, here's what happened, and here's some possible lessons that we can draw from it without completely manipulating the scripture or claiming that that's what the scripture was originally designed to teach. It has its original teaching and purpose, but there may be some additional lessons from it. You just got to be really careful how you state it and what you do, and ensure that you're not harming the text.
Frequency. They had to wake him up. I find it interesting that the waves and the lightning and everything that they probably heard didn't wake him up, but the voice of his disciples woke him up. And they're afraid and they're fearful, and he rebukes them and the storm. And they're amazed. I mean, after everything that they had seen, they're still like, okay, maybe he is who he says he is. I know he raised the dead, but I know he's continually healed me. I know that he's continually blessed. I know there's never been a day where I don't have food, but I'm still complaining about money. And God is at rest in the innermost being. And we're still like, God? And he wakes up and he rebukes it. And that word rebuke in Greek in Mark chapter 4 says he raises the standard of the storm. He calls it to a higher place, actually. It says he called it down and honored it all at the same time, which means, like, anyone have kids in here? Anyone say this statement ever? Come on, you know better than that. I mean, as parents, we hope that they know better than that. Come on, you were raised better than this. That's what, when you rebuke somebody, what you're saying is you're better than that. So he stands up and he looks at the storm and says, you're better than that. And the storm obeys him because it heard a frequency that wasn't attached to the restlessness that creation is growing through. Told the disciples, you're better than this. Who lied to you?
Okay, let's deal with what you called his fabricated Greek definitions first.
Yeah.
He said that the word for rebuke in that account means he honored them and kind of put them in their place by raising them up to a higher level.
Right. So the Greek word there, the verb is epitemao, and it means to express strong disapproval of someone, or to rebuke, or to reprove, or to censure, or to warn, or to prevent an action, or to bring one to an end. That's what the word epitemao means. And so he created his own definition. His definition is
Okay, we're going to jump in here because I think this is a very good. Now, I wanted to go further. Okay, so we may have to. The wheels may come off right here. We may just be stranded on the side of the road for a couple of hours, but we need to stay here. Okay, because Chris Rosebrough, he just gives us the basic idea of what this Greek word is, and I want to try to demonstrate how this pastor that we're listening to was able to draw this conclusion. I think Chris Rosebrough just, hey, this is the definition, but he doesn't explain maybe what could have led to a pastor doing this. Whenever I hear a pastor do something with the Greek, now it bothers me to no end, and I've stated this 100 times, so let's just get this out of the way. I don't care who the pastor is. I don't care what Christian book you read. I don't care if it's even in the Bible dictionary. Always verify when someone says this is what it means in the Hebrew or this is what it means in the Greek. Verify. I hate that's the reality, but you can't trust anyone. It's sad, it's unfortunate, but it's just the case. That's why when in my church, I always have everyone pull out the Blue Letter Bible app and look it up. I do that. A lot of people, it drives them crazy that just tell us what the word means. No, I'm going to make everyone look it up because I want you to get in the habit of always doing that. That's the only way to prevent this. Now, I understand that sometimes using the Blue Letter Bible app, using a Strong's Concordance, those are very basic, giving us the basic understanding of a Greek word. And I know that people who have advanced degrees in Greek will say that's so elementary and look down upon it. But the point is you have to have something that you can grab onto, or you create a situation where the only people who can tell you what the Bible means are those who have an advanced degree in Greek. And so the only way you can ever understand the Bible is you have to take multiple years of Hebrew and Greek. And I've heard, and at Grace University, where I was a student, that's one of the professors basically told everyone that. Unless you have advanced degrees in Greek and Hebrew, you can't understand the Bible. So basically, then there's a magisterium, and the magisterium is defined by how many years you've studied Greek or Hebrew. And that just seems like that's a very non-Protestant idea. And only that, how does that then work? So who are the Greek and Hebrew scholars that I can listen to? Because in many cases, the Greek and Hebrew scholars, they will even argue amongst themselves. So we have to be able to, there's got to be some level of understanding that we can gain to go, nope, that's not what the word means. I understand that there can be complications and there can be additional information needed, but there's got to be a basic level that we can all get to. And I think we all have to do that. But there is a reason this person is making this claim that the Greek word here can mean to basically, hey, you're better than that. That the rebuke here is to trying to raise them up. I still think he's completely not handling the text correctly, but I want you to see how he was able to do this and why he was able to do this. So let's go through some basic concepts here, right? So in Mark chapter 4, I'm going to take my iPad here out of my case, all right? Mark chapter 4, here is the Greek word, right? Here is the Greek word.
Strong's G 2008, epitimao.
Epitimao, there's the Greek word. Now, it is used 29 times. Now, this is very important. Epitimao, this is true of many words in the Bible. You can have a Greek word, epitimao, and it may be translated and used in various ways. And what you have to know is how it's used is based off the context and where it is found. Because epitimao is used a number of ways. So let me explain, all right? Epitimao is used 29 times in the King James. It is translated the following: rebuke 24 times, charge 4 times, and straightly charge 1 time. Strong's definition of epitimao is to tax upon, censure, admonish, by implication, forbid, straightly charge, and rebuke. So epitimao definitely doesn't mean like, hey, I'm going to raise you up, I'm going to honor you by rebuking you. No, the idea of a rebuke is to forbid, to admonish, to censure, to rebuke. That's the idea of epitimao. However, this is what you're going to find interesting. If you go through all the ways that it is used, again, it's used 29 times. It occurs 29 times in 29 verses. If you go through all of them, you'll notice a couple of things. And this is what's interesting. If you look at the Blue Letter Bible app, it gives you an outline of biblical usage. And look at what is found. To show honor to to honor, to raise the price of, to adjudge award, in a sense of merited penalty, to tax with fault, rate, chide, rebuke, reprove, censure, severely, to admonish or charge sharply. So you see that to show honor to honor, to raise the price of, well, obviously he saw that somewhere, and he's like, okay, so that's what Jesus is doing. He's honoring them. He's trying to raise them up. He's like, you're better than this. That's where he got the idea. Now, why is that the outline of biblical usage? Where did that come from? Well, it's used 29 times. So I'm just going to go through these quickly. Even Thayer's lexicon, Thayer's Greek lexicon has it to show honor to raise the price of, and basically an award or a merited penalty. And I think, now, Thayer's Greek lexicon is saying that this is how the word is used in other Greek writings. So that means in other Greek writings, or in other writings that use the Greek language, they use the word this way, right? Epitimao, they used it that way. Now, the Blue Letter Bible app is saying that's the outline for biblical usage. So I know it's going to take a little bit of time. I'm just going to skim through the 29 places that it's used and see if we ever see a time where it's used in that way to show honor to or to raise the price of concept. Let's see if it's ever used that way. So Matthew 8:26, and he saith unto them, why are you fearful, O ye of little faith? Then he arose and rebuked the winds. All right, he rebuked the winds. Okay, so obviously there would be no reason to bring in that other idea. It would go with the basic idea of to admonish, to chide, to rebuke, to reprove, to censure. That seems to be where that idea that's what would fit there. But let's continue. Matthew 12:16, and charged them that they should not make him known. All right. I think the idea of charging is basically, again, go through some of the ideas here, to forbid, to admonish, to charge. He's admonishing them. He's charging them to not make him known. All right, that makes sense. Matthew 16:22, then Peter took him and began to rebuke him, saying, be it far from thee, Lord, this shall not be unto thee. Same kind of concept of the way we would understand rebuke. Matthew 17:18, and Jesus rebuked the devil, and he departed out of him. Clearly, when Jesus rebuked the devil, he's not saying, hey, you're better than this. Hey, I'm honoring you. Clearly, that's not the case. Again, context is what is important. Matthew 19:13, and where they brought unto him little children, that he should put his hands on them and pray, and the disciples rebuked them. Matthew 20:31, and the multitudes rebuked them because they should hold their peace, but they cried the more. All right. Mark 1:25, and Jesus rebuked him, saying, hold thy peace. Mark 3:12, and he straitly charged them that they should not make him known. Mark 4:39, and he arose and rebuked the wind. Mark 8:30, and he charged them that they should tell no man. Mark 8:32, and he spake that saying openly, and Peter took him and began to rebuke him. All of these carry the basic idea of rebuke that we would understand it to be. Not that you're better than this, or I'm honoring you, or I'm trying to raise you to a new level. No, this is a harsh kind of a rebuke. Mark 8:33, but when he had turned about and looked on his disciples, he rebuked Peter, saying, get thee behind me, Satan. I mean, clearly we get the idea there. Mark 9:25, and when Jesus saw that the people came running together, he rebuked the foul spirit. Same concept. Mark 10:13, and they brought young children to him that he should touch them, and his disciples rebuked those that brought them. Mark 10:48, and many charged him that he should hold his peace, but he cried the more a great deal, thou son of David, have mercy on me. Again, this charging, they're trying to forbid, they're trying to tell him to be quiet, trying to silence him, admonishing him not to speak. Get the same idea. Luke 4:35, and Jesus rebuked him, saying, hold thy peace and come out of him. Luke 4:39, he stood over her and rebuked the fever, and it left her. Luke 4:41, And the devils also came out of many, crying out and saying, Thou art Christ, the Son of God. And he, rebuking them, suffered them not to speak. Clearly, he's not honoring them or raising them to another level. None of the concepts that we've heard supposedly mentioned here. Luke 8:24, and they came to him and awoke him, saying, Master, Master, we perish. Then he arose and rebuked the wind. Luke 9:21, he straightly charged them and commanded them to tell no man that thing. Luke 9:42, and as he was yet coming, the devil threw him down and tear him, and Jesus rebuked the unclean spirit. Luke 9:55, he turned and rebuked them. Luke 17:3, take heed to yourselves. If thy brother trespass against thee, rebuke him. And if he repent, forgive him. All right. Now, you could argue, is there possibly a different understanding there when you're rebuking a brother that sinned against you? Maybe you could possibly, but it's still the idea that you're rebuking their sin. You're admonishing them. You're telling them that it's wrong. You're condemning it. Now, you could argue that there would be a little bit more saying maybe, you're trying to honor them by showing them love and respect by offering a rebuke so that they can fix the situation. You could make some kind of an argument there, but you would have a specific context for it. Luke 18:15, and they brought unto him also infants that they would touch them, but when his disciples saw it, they rebuked them. Clearly, Jesus gets onto the disciples for what they're doing, so they're not honoring anyone or trying to raise anyone to some kind of level. Luke 18:39, and they which went before rebuked him that he should hold his peace, but he cried so much the more. Clearly, they're trying to tell him to be quiet. They're not honoring him or trying to raise him to a new level. Some of the disciples from among the multitude said unto him, Master, rebuke thy disciples. They want his disciples rebuked. They're not looking because they think they're doing something wrong. Luke 23:40, but the other answering rebuked him, saying, Dost thou not fear God, seeing thou art in the same condemnation? This is the thieves on the cross. That's a rebuke. That's not trying to honor anything. He's like, what are you doing? Now, here we go. We have two more. 2 Timothy 4:2, preach the word, be instant in season, out of season, reprove, rebuke, exhort with all longsuffering and doctrine. Then you have Jude 1:9. And again, I don't even know why they have this as the outline of biblical usage. I don't even know why it's there. Because Thayer's lexicon, all of their sources for these ideas come from Greek writings, not from the biblical text. So I don't know why it would be listed. I don't know why they would say it's the outline of biblical usage. But if you're going to say it's to show honor or to raise the price of or to raise someone else or to award or something along those lines, there is very few texts where that would even make any sense. Probably 98% of all the text clearly carries the idea to censure, to admonish, to forbid, to charge, to rebuke. That's what it means. Most likely this person saw something like this and said, to show honor, to raise the price of. Okay, that's what's going on here because it was going to fit his theology. That's the only, I'm trying to come to a reason why he would say these things. There has to be a reason why he's saying this. I don't think he's just completely making it up. He came across something. He had to come across something. So I'm trying to give him somewhat of the benefit of the doubt. It's still completely wrong that this pastor would try to put forth that, hey, what Jesus is he's telling the storm is you're better than this. He's in a sense honoring the storm. He's honoring the disciples. You're better than this. And I just think that you've got to be able to explain why you're coming to that conclusion. You'll note that the pastor doesn't go and say, hey, everyone, here's the Greek word, and explain that. I just want you to see that in the outline of biblical usage, at least some of those concepts appear. Chris Roseborough doesn't point this out, but it needs to be pointed out because if you were to look it up, you would be like, wait a minute. It says right there, outline of biblical usage, to show honor to honor. All right, so it can mean that. Well, it can, but you would have to find the context where this would show up. And I think, now we have the verb here. Hang on, let me look here. The root word comes from two other Greek words. It comes from, okay, that's not super helpful. All right, let me look at this one more time. One more time. Give me one more time here. I'm going to look here. Okay, epitomao, and then it comes from also this Greek word. Okay, this Greek word, which epitomao it derives from, is this Greek word is this?
Strong's G 5091, tamao.
Tamao is used 21 times. It's translated 19 times as honor, 2 times as value. To revere, to honor, to value. So epitomao comes from tamao, which does carry some of that idea. Maybe that's where some of the confusion is coming. I don't know. Yeah, I don't know, but I just want you to realize epitomao definitely is carrying the idea of a rebuke. So he's completely misrepresenting it. I'm just trying to figure out how this misrepresentation came forth, what brought it forth. And I wanted us just to look at all of that. I know you may be thinking, man, you took too much time on this. No, I didn't, because I want you to see how these things happen, right? Let me make it very clear. It's one thing to go, man, like it's easy, put it this way, it's easy to turn on the microphone and go, well, this pastor is out of his mind and he's wrong. It's important to try to figure out, well, how did the error arise? What is the origin of the error? Because if we can figure out the origin of the error, then we can protect ourselves from it happening to us. And if you looked up an interlinear, epitomao, you're going to see at least in the Blue Letter Bible app, and I would have to look at other sources, that for some reason, maybe in other Greek writings, epitomao is used that way. And I don't know why it would be used that way, but at least in the Bible, we went through all of its usage. Almost every one of them would take on the very negative connotation, not about honoring or saying you're better than that or anything along those lines. So I just wanted to do our best to try to unpack that and be fair. I know I went through that really, really quick. I apologize, but I wanted to make it further in this, and I'm not, I hate when I don't get as far as I want to, but sometimes I have to be more concerned with being very, going in depth and being accurate. I just think Chris Rosebrough did not at least, I think he should have at least tried to figure out, well, why would he do this? Now, again, maybe the pastor, maybe he just made it all up, but typically they saw something, and then in their minds they're like, oh, that's what's really going on here. And I always like to try to find out why. So hopefully that makes sense. All right, I'm going to back this up just a little bit, so we get kind of an idea of what's going on. Here we go.
Up to a higher level.
Right. So the Greek word there, the verb is epitomao, and it means to express strong disapproval of someone, or to rebuke, or to reprove, or to censure, or to warn, or to prevent an action, or to bring one to an end. That's what the word epitomao means. And so he created his own definition. His definition is to raise it to a higher standard. And the reason he did this here is to actually not address what Jesus said to the storm. Jesus said to the storm, "Peace, be still." This is the ESV translation of these words, and it roughly translates as that. It's very strong language. Jesus imperatively tells the storm to stop storming. But what William Hinn is doing here is, by giving us a false definition of the word rebuke, he's now changed the content of what Jesus said. And rather than saying, "Peace, be still," now Jesus is saying to the storm, as well as to his disciples, "Come on, guys, you're better than this." And if you were to think about it, that same word rebuke is used throughout the New Testament. One of the occurrences occurs in the book of Jude, where it talks about the fact that Michael the archangel, arguing with the devil over the body of Moses, did not issue a strong rebuke, but said, "The Lord rebuke you." And if we take this false definition seriously, then what Michael the archangel said to the devil was, "Come on, Satan, you're better than this," which makes no sense at all. And so now we're off to the races, if you would, because...
And I just have to jump back in just to make sure. I want to make this point so painfully clear. You can have a Greek word that sometimes has multiple meanings, right? And so let's say epitomao could mean, honor, raise up. Let's say it could mean that. Well, when should it be understood that way? You have to look at the context. Because this is what happens. You'll find someone out there and say, well, hey, the Greek word means this. And you're like, yes, the Greek word can mean that. The question is, should it be understood that way in that context? We understand this in English, right? I can say, man, I saw this movie. It was so cool. Am I referring to the temperature? Clearly not. I'm referring to that cool is being used in a completely different way. The word cool can also refer to temperature. I could have said, I went to see this movie and man, it was so cool out that I had to wear a jacket. Okay, now the context helps me understand. In fact, I could use cool both ways. I got ready to go see this movie and it was so cool out. I had to get a jacket, but man, that movie was cool. All right. Now I know that maybe not the best example, but you get the idea. The word can have different meanings, and the context and how it's being used determines which meaning should be assigned to the word. So even if epitomao can mean rise up, honor, that kind of thing, which tomao seems to definitely carry the idea of honor big time, but epitomao, the verb here, being used as a verb, it's a strong rebuke, and it has to be understood that way. So you would have to find something in the text that would say, no. Epitomao should not be understood as a harsh rebuke. It should be used as honoring and trying to raise up to a different level. You would have to show me something in the text that would demand that. And considering the New Testament, at least 98% of the time, 99% of the time, you may even go 100%. It's not being used to honor or to raise up. It's being used to rebuke harshly, to forbid. Now, you could argue that the purpose of a rebuke is to try to, in a sense, you're showing honor to try to raise someone up. You could try to make some kind of an argument there, but you got to be very careful when you start going out there and getting away from basically the way the word is used throughout the entire New Testament. That's where you get in trouble. And that's why one of the things I do in my church, which drives people crazy sometimes, is like, hey, I mean, we did this one time when we were trying to deal with the whole concept of Israel, spiritual Israel. We spent 6 months as a church going through every single use of the word Israel in the entire Bible so that we could say, this is how the word is used. This is what it means. Every church service was like, everybody got a concordance? Here we go. Where did we stop? All right, today we start in this verse, this verse, this verse, this verse, this verse, this verse. It was the most, you talk about not fun sermons, but that's studying the Bible. That's what you're supposed to do, right? Or I could just stand there behind the pulpit and say, out of the, 3,000 usages of the word, I could tell everyone that. Some people like that kind of preaching better, but then you're taking my word for it. Why not take your people through every usage of the word, and when they're done, no one can ever deceive them. No one can ever lie to them because they've seen the way every time the word is used, how it's used. Well, we just briefly, we didn't do this correctly because we went through it so quickly, but we just looked at every use of the word epitomao. We went through every place where the Greek word is found in the New Testament. So now you know for sure exactly how it is used. That's why I think all preachers should do that. All preachers should do that. I know that no preacher will ever take my word for it, but here's the reason why. Because sometimes you can even have the idea, epitomao means this. You can be convinced of it. But then when you stop and go through all of the usage, you may come back and go, whoa, wait a minute, I was wrong. It's to protect yourself. It's to protect everyone. So you work through it together. So I just want to make sure you realize sometimes a Greek word can have multiple meanings. Context determines which meaning you assign to the word in that given context. I know this is like hermeneutics 101. This is like basic stuff, but it's so important.
These people are trusting this man that he's actually studied the Greek language, and that these definitions that he's giving of these words, here the word rebuke, that's really what that means, and that the real meaning of the scriptures locked up in that definition. But what he said is not only spurious, it's completely fabricated.
Pastor Chris Rosebrough is our guest.
Okay, now here's what we're going to do. I apologize for this because I know we've already covered that audio clip in the first part, but we covered it again, and we did expand our discussion a little bit. But then what we'll do, I'm going to stop here, and we'll come right back live on the air here in just, give me about a minute. We'll come back live, and then we'll just start with the next audio clip, which is from Issues, Etc. They go through a series of commercials and ads. So I added the audio twice, and I have it already queued up at the 12-minute and 20-second mark. I already have it ready to go, and then we'll come back in and see where we can go. But I think this is a very important lesson, especially to everyone out there. When someone, I know pastors do this. This is what it means in the Greek. This is what it means in the Greek. And let's make it very clear. I'm not telling you that while you're sitting there in church, please hear me here. Please, 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 please hear me. I'm not saying when you're sitting in church, your pastor is preaching and say, hey, this is what it means in the Greek. You just stop listening to the rest of the sermon and you pull out your tools and you just sit there. No. Don't do that. Just write down in your note, verify. Then you go home. You look up, you go through, you look. And if you find something that doesn't seem to make sense, or that you simply, in a nice, respectful way, contact your pastor and go, hey, pastor, you mentioned this in the sermon. I went home and I've spent a couple of hours looking at this. I'm a little confused. That doesn't appear to be what the Greek and Hebrew word means. Now, hopefully, the pastor will be humble and say, well, thank you so very much for pointing that out. Let me take a look at this. And be willing to admit if they were wrong. If the pastor just dismisses you or blows you off, or you can't even talk to your pastor, well, then you need to find a new church, okay? That's very simple. I had, one time I mentioned something in Isaiah about a Hebrew word, and the sermon was over, and I got a call, I think that afternoon, and someone said, hey, pastor, I looked that up. That's not what that word means. And I was like, oh, you're right. And I had to stand back up Sunday night and apologize and explain exactly what the word meant. Now, is it embarrassing? Yes. Am I grateful the person did that? Absolutely. And that's one of the reasons that what I should have done is I should have stopped everything I did and looked up the word right then, but I was just going from memory, and because it wasn't really the main emphasis of the text, and I wanted to move on to through my sermon, and that's when I started learning, you know what? It's about studying the Bible. It's not about completing sermons. It's about studying the Bible. It's about equipping people. It's not about, I've got to finish this sermon tonight. No, if I mention a word, stop what I'm doing, look up the word. Now I just grab my iPad and just play it for everyone, because then everyone knows I'm looking at the word. And I challenge everyone in my church to look it up. Technology makes it now easy. Before, everyone had to have a Strong's Concordance and look it up. But now it's just, you can do it electronically. So there's no reason not to engage everyone doing that. But I've been there. So I'm not saying this like, oh, I've always done it perfectly. I've made plenty of mistakes. You just got to be willing to admit the mistake and then try to press on. But you should welcome that. You want your people looking things up. You want people asking those questions, because you've got to try to figure out what the truth is, and it requires everyone. So just remember, always verify, but not in the middle of the sermon. Okay, for crying out loud. Pay attention to the sermon, verify later. And then another very important thing is just to remember that sometimes a pastor, and this is where it can get complicated. The pastor may say, hey, the Greek word can mean this, and that's what it means here. What you have to do is go, wait a minute. The Greek word has multiple different ways that it's used. How do we know it's used that way here? So then it's up to the pastor to determine exegetically, this is the reason it's used that way in this text. And then you have to try to go look and see, okay, I think that makes sense. Okay, I think it's possible. You have to look at the context, and that requires a couple of things you can do. Is that the way that author always uses the Greek word? Is that same Greek word used in verses very close to that one or very soon after? You can look at a lot of things to go, okay, wait a minute. You're saying that's what the Greek word means there, but the same Greek word is used 2 verses before it. And you're saying that it means something different there. Why would they change the way they're using it? What? Give me the explanation. And this gets into a lot of then hermeneutical issues and exegetical issues. But the average church member has to be equipped to understand these things, or they'll be tossed to and fro with every wind of doctrine or be deceived. And so, yeah, this pastor was playing. This pastor was not being fair with the word. And to be honest, I think Chris Roseborough, and I know he's got a limited amount of time, I think he should have gone into more detail as well, explaining, well, maybe this is where he came up with the idea. Because we just looked at an interlinear, and the idea is at least hinted at, but it never seems to manifest itself in the New Testament. And Thayer's lexicon indicates that it's used that way, and they don't point to biblical passages. They point to Greek writing outside of the Bible, which then tells me, okay, I don't care how it's used outside of the Bible. How is it used inside the Bible? All right. Now, when I say I don't care, it's always interesting to know how the Greek word is used outside of the Bible and why the biblical authors use it in a different way. That is interesting, but ultimately for us, it's how the Bible uses it that matters. So yeah, there's just a lot of basic lessons there that I think is important. All right, I'll stop. I'll be back in just a minute, and we'll finish this up this evening. All right, I'll be back. So thank you for listening. Email me newsif@yahoo.com, newsif@yahoo.com. And now I'll be right back, and hopefully we can bring this in for a strong finish. All right. Thank you for listening.